right here.
Okay.
You're all comfortable. You're
Yeah.
Okay, so usually the first question that I just ask for you to answer, if you could say your full name and then where you grew up. Yeah.
Aloha kako, aloha. My name is Fred Keakokalani Cachola, and I grew up in that beautiful place, Kohala, on the island of Hawaii. Moko o Keawe, as Hawaiians say, Moko o Keawe is the island of Hawaii, and one of its 7 main districts is the Moku of Kohala. That's where I grew up. And my friend here, Lucas, who's doing a beautiful project, by the way, and that's why I'm very pleased to participate in this project. He's here trying to collect that rich legacy of Kohala and interviewing kupuna, people that his mother knew and his grandmother knew, and he has some Kohala roots too. So I'm actually talking to an opio. Opio is a younger person, opio of Kohala. And in a way that makes me feel good, because telling the story about how I grew up is like telling the story of Kohala from my little perspective to another Kohala opio. And that's wonderful. I do hope Lucas will have a outstanding product. And we'll have it at the Kohala Library for everybody to see it. We'll have it at the Kohala Historical Center when it's built a few years from now. And Lucas is actually contributing to what I truly believe is absolutely necessary, is to capture the essence of what Kohala is through its people, like myself. So, my father was Federico Laya Cachola. He came to Hawaii in 1924, and, well, make a long story short, he married my mother. My father is Ilocano Chinese, and since he was the firstborn in his family, his mother and father wanted him to have the best of everything. So he grew up, actually went to all the kind of schools they could find. He went to like a college, university in the Philippines, so he could read and write. He was very fluent in English, and that did him well when he came to Hawaii, by the way. But he met my mother here, and my mother is pure Hawaiian. My grandparents, and her name was Esther Piuhia U'u, and my father's name was Federico Laya Cachola. And I was born in 1935. I was the 3rd child. There were eventually 6 of us, but I was the 3rd child. And the first 5 years of my life growing up was probably within a radius of 1 mile. You know, when you're little, growing up, you don't move too far. And my dad didn't have a car. Not too many people had cars in Kohala Plantation. And that's the community, the entire moku of Kohala. And then there's little plantation camps. What are plantation camps? Plantation camps were houses put together, built by the plantation for their workers to live. and they wanted their workers close to the sugar mill, and so the mill was located in this little village called Halaula. But because Kohala had several plantations, they had about 7 different sugar plantations that produce sugar. The plantation camps were then scattered throughout North Kohala. There was Ho'ea Camp, Hawi Camp, and camp is just, it's not where you pitch up a tent, you know. Most people will call that a camp. But in our growing up, camp was simply a collection of homes at different parts of the North Kohala. And usually around the mills where those plantation workers worked at. So Halawa Plantation had a Halawa camp. Newly Plantation had a Newly camp. Hawi had a camp, and ours was in Halaula. That's where I grew up. And plantation house was very simple, very rudimentary, very basic. And I remember when I was a little kid, there was a kitchen. The main house was a kitchen and 2 bedrooms. 2 bedrooms and a parlor and a kitchen. And in the kitchen, it was, there was almost like a place, like a fireplace, where you could actually build a fire to cook. But nobody cooked at that time, and at that time there was no gas. Zap, boom. No, it was kerosene. It was a kerosene stove, and there were 2 burners and 3 burners. Ours was a 3-burner kerosene stove with kerosene and a top with the pots, and on the side was a gallon of kerosene that fed through the wick and light, and boop, you got a fire. So my mother cooked on that for a long time. There were no refrigerators. And we had electricity, but it was very, very simple. Like, this would be like one room, and there'd be one light, click, that illuminated the room. You went to the next room, there was one light, click. And the outhouse, we didn't have an outhouse. Wow. It was like the house was here, and then there was our neighbor here, another neighbor here, and another neighbor here. And in between those 4 houses were 4, shall I call them bathrooms? Yeah. So there was this common bathroom that had 4 bathrooms. 2 houses in the back went in this way, and our house was here, and Nakanishi house, yeah, our neighbor was Nakanishi, went this way. And so there was a toilet with a constantly flowing water. It wasn't dry. You didn't have to put lime or, it was no smell at all because it was constantly flowing. The water, and you're looking at puka, and there's water flowing constantly. So it was rather clean and pleasant, and no hot water heaters, of course. And my mother used to bathe me in the wash basin. And there was a spigot there, and that's where I was washed as a baby, in that tub, I guess, a wash basin. And she didn't have a washing machine. It was all by hand on a scrub board. And I remember as a little boy watching my mom scrubbing our clothes. And then no dryer, of course, and my dad built some clotheslines in the back where my mother would dry the clothes. So it was a very simple plantation life, right? In the morning, I remember there was a whistle that blew, big steam whistle, loud. You could hear it from the plantation mill. You could hear that whistle blow, and all our plantation workers would get up and go to work. And some went on cane trucks. They went to the fields. My father worked in a mill, and his job was to boil the syrup into the right consistency where the crystals were being made, and he had these huge vats. To me, it was very complicated, but my dad was trained so that he could, I guess, get the syrup cooked to the right temperature, and I remember going up and watching him work. When I was a little older, I take his supper, or his lunch, and it was in a little blue bag, and we call it cow tin, you know. There was a lunch pail, and the bottom of the pail was about that high, and always with rice, full of rice, and the top was about that high with a cover, and it had, you know, whatever my mom cooked or whatever my sisters cooked, and then a thermos of iced tea or some ice water, and it was wrapped in a little blue bag, and I'd take it up to him. And sometimes I'd watch him work, and he had this valve that he opened up, and then he checked the crystallization to see whether it was ready to be crystallized, and crystals were forming, and then he'd let it down to the centrifugal machines, and they would spin out the molasses. But yeah, so that was growing up in Halaula Down Camp. And again, this is not camping grounds, you know, it's a collection of houses. And so we stayed there for the first 5 years, and then after that we moved from down camp to up camp. Brand new house. This was in 1940. This was before the Second World War. What I remember very well is that, you know, my father didn't have a pickup truck, and the plantation used their trucks to help move us from the old house down camp to the new house up camp. And then this was the mill in the middle, and then there was our town. The town of Halaula was a coffee shop, one building, coffee shop on one side, the plantation store, all kind of stuff you could buy at a plantation store, and then the post office, Halaula post office, Halaula coffee shop, and the plantation store. And then I remember they built the Kohala Theater. Beautiful. It was really the most beautiful theater. Consolidated company built a theater there in Kohala. And so it was the best looking theater. People came from miles around every Sunday. No matter what movie played, you always went into the theater and watch a movie, you know. And so, and guess how much the movie cost? 9 cents a ticket. 9 cents. So for a dime, you could watch a movie. And if you wanted popcorn, there was a little corner in the lobby there. One bag of popcorn, 5 cents. So for 15 cents, you had the whole afternoon of entertainment. You could watch a movie, and you had a bag of popcorn for 15 cents in the most beautiful theater on the island of Hawaii. And Kohala, I remember we were so proud that we did have this beautiful theater. And I remember growing up in Halula where no matter what the movies were, I don't care what it was, everybody went to the movies on Sundays. After church, matinee, boom, everybody came there. And it was a favorite form of entertainment. So it was growing up in Halula, down camp and up camp. It's probably where I spent the first 5 years of my life. And it was just about maybe half a mile from each other, not too far. And I remember very well my dad said to me when we had moved, he said, "Son, why don't we go down and get the daylilies?" And my dad planted daylilies around the border of the house. And I remember those daylilies very well. They were about my height, when I was growing up. And beautiful daylilies, orange, nice, brilliant orange. And he wanted to be sure that he had some of those plants at the new house. And so we went down on a wheelbarrow. My father made a wheelbarrow, wooden wheelbarrow with handles and wheels. And we walked down maybe a little less than a mile. And he dug up the daylilies, put it in a wheelbarrow, had some dirt, and then we brought it all the way up to the old house, to the new house. And I remember we planted all the daylilies, and then he turned to me and said, "Son, I think you're old enough now, you can take care of these daylilies." And so I immediately, from 5 years old, my job was to take care of the yard and putting in those daylilies. And I cared for those daylilies until I was 12, and then I left to go to a boarding school, Kamehameha schools. And I kind of loved those daylilies because it came from the old house. He planted those daylilies there before I was born. And here we are, putting them in a new house, and they were my responsibility. I felt pretty good, 5-year-old kid taking care of the yard. And so those are some of the things I remember growing up when I was below 5. And I remember my mom and dad were so happy when she got a washing machine. And it was, I remember the brand was Easy, E-A-S-Y. Easy refrigerator and an Easy washer. My mom was in heaven. She now had a washing machine that did the clothes, and we had a refrigerator. And I do remember very well Richard Bartholomew, who worked at a plantation store. One of his jobs was to deliver the ice. And he would come with his truck, park, and grab a block of ice, open the door, and ice went into one block, and the other side were the shelves, and there was the ice box. And when my mother got a new one, my dad took that out on the side of the house, and he used it for storing all his tools, hammers, sickles, and wrenches or whatever. He used it as a toolbox. And so it was great. My mom was so happy. And I never forgot the first day. It was so funny because we got to the house, and before we walked in, there was a little spigot on the side by the front porch. And she said, "Okay, wait, everybody, okay, all you kids, wash your feet. We're going into the house. Wash your feet real good." So we washed our feet real good. She opened the door, and there was sawdust all over. and we kind of, oh, Mom, what's all this rubbish? And here we are with clean feet, and my mom had to sweep the parlor because the carpenters had left a lot of sawdust. And anyway, I remember that. And so growing up there was up camp, and then I met some of the boys. Our neighbors was the Gonzales, and they were a Portuguese, Chinese, Hawaiian family. And she and my mom were very, very close. One of the best things I like about growing up in Halaula was that lovely neighborhood, up camp. And they were all different kind of ethnic groups. For example, our family was Chinese, Filipino, Hawaiian. Next door was Portuguese, Chinese, Hawaiian. And then there was the Kanashiros, Japanese, the Unitas, Japanese. Behind us was the Vintas, Portuguese, Puerto Rican, part Hawaiian. And then there was Junior Casimiro. And then there was the Velocitos. Then there was the Condas and the Sushitos. I mean, we're a mixed group of ethnic people. And it didn't bother us that we were Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Filipinos, whatever. We're all one of a kind. And it made us feel comfortable. I never was afraid to walk around that plantation camp. Always felt safe. In fact, they treated us like their children. And you know, growing up, the adults were like our aunties and uncles. That's the kind of feeling I had. And no matter where I went, I also had to behave, because if I did anything wrong, my mom and dad would know in a second, you know. So we not only had moms and dads, we had uncles and aunties, a lot of them, that really cared that we were being brought up right, that we were safe, and that nothing would happen to us. It was such a good feeling to grow up with that kind of a surroundings. And then the new houses were here and here, and then there was an old camp, the older part of Halaula camp, were all these Filipinos. And most of them were all single. There were a couple of married Filipinos in there. The Orita family, the Bentayan, Leng and Bentayan, my very dear friends. There were a couple of Filipino families, but most of them were single men who had come from the Philippines to work on a plantation and, and send money home. That's all they did. But again, because my dad was Ilocano, Filipino, and I was part Filipino, they looked at me as their son. And I remember two words that I learned maybe when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. One was Baroque, and in Ilocano that means son. Baroque. And then I would say, when Tata, you know, I learned Tata was father. And these men were not my father, but it was my way as a little boy to respect them as such. And when I would say, Baroque, I'd say, when Tata, you know, yes, father. And then he'd speak to me in the Ilocano. I couldn't quite understand, but like for sometimes, you know, they were older men, and there was this katudai tree. It's a tree with white flowers, and the flowers are edible. And so there was a Baroque, and then he would point to the tree. And I knew immediately he wanted me to go up and pick up this flower so they could have it for dinner, or they could have it for a salad. And I knew, Baroque. And, or they go like, we had these huge mango trees. Baroque, go get some mangoes. And I would climb the tree and give them mangoes. And there was one guy, Andres, And his name was Andres, but I always call him Tata. And whenever I needed a haircut, he was the man. In fact, I didn't need any appointment. We didn't have a telephone at that time. There was no telephone. In fact, the only appliance we had was a radio. I remember Philip radio. And my sisters were aghast when I was trying to figure out, where is this guy talking to me? And there was a little speaker and it had a cover, and I heard the voice coming out of the speaker. So I said, it must be somewhere in there. So I made a hole, and I tried, and my sister scolded me for making that hole. But I just couldn't figure out where this man was coming from, And so, whenever I needed a haircut, though, Andres would see me walking and say, "Hey, Baruch." And then I learned the word pokis. Pokis is haircut. And he'd say, "Baruch, pokis." And I would sit on his chair, just a little stool, on his porch, and he would cut my hair just with scissors and comb. And it was free, never paid. And I remember the day when he got an electric clipper. Yes, an electric clipper. And he was so proud that he had this electric clipper. And so I grew up with very safe surroundings. Uncles and aunties who made sure that nothing happened to us. Uncles and aunties who taught us how to behave, how to be nice, how to play together as kids. And we had a little park. Somebody had a bat and somebody had a ball, and we played baseball. I loved the game. And then other games we played was marbles. And we had this game called Puss Hole. It was a hole in the ground, and you had the marbles, and you would say 2 in, and the idea was to drop the marbles, and you can only have 2 go in. And if 2 went in, you won. If 3 went in, you lost. If only 1 went in, then you could have, if you had another turn, you'd put 1 more in. And I loved that game. And I used to keep my marbles in a big can, and it was always nice to have a lot of marbles because, I played the game pretty well. And there was a high school, you had 5 holes, you had 1, 2, 3, and you had to play the game. And then there was bang wall, and then there was fish. And another thing we liked growing up was making our own kites. And Kohala has a nice, strong, steady wind. And the school grounds, which was close by, had a huge open back, big yard, a big field in the back. And it was fun to just make kites, simple kites. And we used a string and bamboo and newspaper. And for paste, we just got rice from the pot and mashed it with water and made it into a paste. And we used that for pasting the newspaper on whatever shape kites we wanted. And we tied old rags to steady the kite. And for string, oh my goodness, we had all the string we wanted because the plantation had this huge chute in what we call a sugar room, and they had these bags, burlap bags, that went underneath and whoop, and it got filled with 80 pounds of sugar. Zap, and then it went through a sewing machine. Zzz, 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 zzz. So there were rolls of string. And we'd go down there on a Sunday when the mill was closed or something, and we get a couple of balls of string. And then we tie it to our kites. go up to the school grounds, and just let it fly. And then we'd have fun. Oh, look at that. And so sometimes we put a little paper plate. We just tear a little paper plate, put it on a string, the wind would catch it, and you could see that paper plate going all the way up. And we challenged to see how many plates you could have. And then after a while, we'd get pretty bored, and we let the kites go as far as we can. And then we said, wouldn't it be fun if we just broke the string and let the kites puck loose and see how far they go? And then we say, okay, then we make a little bet. See whose kite is going to fly the farthest. And we would say, okay, ready, everybody's ready. Puck loose. And a kite would take off. And the string would be dragged with. And it would go. I think we, at Kohala, we went on our bikes and we went on the road and we could see the kites. And it went all the way till almost Iole. That was like almost a mile away. I mean, the kites were high and the winds were strong. So that's some of the experience I remember growing up. So that's what it was like. And plantation life, to me, it was simple. We're all well-fed. We were modest families, and nobody were millionaires. And we used to have this area where the plantation managers, the engineers, the chemists, all of the managers, and we called that Haole camp. Haole meant foreigners. And so the Haole camp, and Mr. Pratt was the manager, and I remember Mr. Gandol and Edney family and the Southwicks, Cowdeys and the Bowmans. They were all up there. And then there was Halula up camp, Halula down camp. And so the other thing I liked growing up and was the freedom to roam. Cane fields don't need fences. They don't need gates. So we could go, really, for 15, from Mahokona to Pololu. It was all plantation roads. And we were free to wander and play anywhere. Our favorite snack was the chew cane. We never had fast foods. We only had that coffee shop. There was no McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King. And we ate off the land. We knew where the guava trees were. We knew what guavas were sweet, what guavas were sour. There was always cane. In fact, we'd play games with them. We'd see who could peel the cane the fastest, And we'd all get same size cane. Okay, everybody measured. Okay, yours is the same. Everybody got the same size cane. Right. Same thickness. Okay, we all got the same size cane. Ready, go. And see how fast we could peel it. And then we'd chew it. For swimming, we had the reservoirs. There was a lot of reservoirs that the plantation kept full of water with flumes to fill them up, to irrigate the cane, and that became our swimming pools. And then there was those ditches, big ditches where the water flowed into the reservoirs, and we'd swim. That's where I learned to swim. In this one reservoir we call Koi Pond, because there were a lot of koi. There was actual carp in the pond, huge carps. And I remember Alfredo Rita would get his father's net. And when the reservoir was low and shallow, it was easy to drag a net and catch carp. I mean, really huge carp, and they're strong. They're one of the strongest fishes you ever saw. And so we call it Koi Pond. And that's where we swam. Then we made canoes. Get an old tin roof, bend it, put a 2x4 in the front, and put a big piece of wood in the back, nail it. Then we get a railroad tie, put it underneath, nail it down. That became like a rudder, a keel. Yeah, like a keel was a railroad tie. And we pound that down, and we made outriggers out of 2x4s. And we got tar from this water tank, we call it white tank, 2 huge water tanks that were further up in the village. And around that was this black tar. And when it was warm, we could just dig up the tar. So we used that tar and we made canoes. And so we didn't have any, park and recreation playgrounds. We went and played ourselves on our grounds. And we went fishing. Made our own bamboo poles. There was no fishing store where you could buy, the store did have, fishing hooks and lead and fishing line. But we made our own bamboo, and we learned how to cure the bamboo. We actually went to Kohala, cut our own bamboo, came home, made a little fire, and then bent the bamboo to straighten it out and put it on top of the house so the sun would get it and it would dry nice and straight. And we made our own bamboo. And then we walked down to the Kohala lighthouse with a kapanai and hapu and did some fishing. That was our favorite fishing grounds was by the lighthouse. And our favorite swimming area was at Kapanaya because it was a little bay, calm. And so, growing up in Kohala was not only safe and secure, but it was a lot of fun. Safe fun. Our own kind of fun. We had no swimming pools, but we learned to swim in the reservoirs. We had no fun and games, we made our own games. I remember we used to have and I forgot out of the clothespin you could make a pea shooter and the spring, and we made our own tops, and we played marbles, and we played with yo-yos and spinning tops, and made our own kites. It was great. It was really great. So I spent about half an hour just telling you about the time I was a kid, but those are happy memories for me, very happy memories. And so growing up in Kohala, Haleula was a beautiful place, a lot of good friends. And a lot of my friends by now, by the way, they're all gone. There are not too many people who were like me, born in 1935. And that's when the plantations were consolidated. The 7 plantations became 1 plantation. And it stayed that way for over 100 years. Over 100 years. So I remember that very well. I remember December 7, 1941 very well too, because on it's Sunday morning, we were going to Sunday school, and at that time my mom and dad had us going to this church with Arthur Kong. He was the postmaster, he was the pastor, and it was a Mormon church, reorganized Latter-day Saints, and there were about 5 or 6 families, and all the kids came to Sunday school. And that morning, I was a little early, so I was down at the park playing with some kids, waiting for Sunday school to open. And then I remember seeing all these people running around. I said, what's going on? People were running from one, and they were picking up their kids. They came to the park and said, let's go. And then I saw my sister come in and said, Dad wants us to go home, let's go home, let's go home. And when we went home, Father had the radio on, Pearl Harbor was being bombed. I remember that very distinctly. Playing at the park with some other kids, and then seeing the mothers and dads running to the park to get the kids. And I said, well, why did everybody have to go home? And then my sister came down and fetched me and said, we gotta go home. We're not going to church. And there, my father was and he was almost tears in his eyes when he was hearing the broadcast about Pearl Harbor being bombed, December 7, 1941. And so I was, 6 years old. I remember that very well. And I remember very well during World War II. During World War II, the sugar mill was like on a mission to make as much sugar as they can. And I remember there was a huge poster on the side of the mill that gave how much tonnage they produced. And you could see the color going up, and the higher the color, the more sugar they made. And actually, because of World War II, I saw my dad reading the paper, Hilo Tribune Herald, and it would tell him exactly what was going on, and he would tell us a little bit. And then I said, well, if I can read it, I don't have to wait for my dad. And I was in first grade, second grade. So I learned how to read. And I would go home and say, okay, what's going on in the war? And I could read it. And the war motivated me to learn how to read so I could read the newspaper and see what was going on. And the Battle of Guadalcanal and Midway, huge headlines. And that's what helped me to read, was just to learn what was going on during the war. And then I remember, after the Battle of Guadalcanal and Bougainvillea, and the Marines, and they were successful in the South Pacific, 2 divisions of Marine camped right out here in Waimea. 2 divisions. The 5th, and I don't know what division. Now these were the guys who fought at Guadalcanal. They came up here to recuperate, to build themselves up again, and they used all our beaches as places to practice landing crafts. So the beaches were kind of taken over by the military. All the Hapuna, Kauai was all used for Marines. And with thousands of Marines going around, on weekends they had nothing to do. And I remember they'd come down to Kohala. We only had that coffee shop and the theater, but they would jump on the trucks from Waimea to go to Kohala just to watch the movie, because we had this big, beautiful theater. And it was time for us to earn a few bucks. So I made, and not me, a whole bunch of us kids made little shoe shine boxes, so we could shine the shoes of these Marines and make a few bucks, And then we went around the Filipino camp, and anybody who had shoes to shine, we shined them. But it came about because of the war, and these guys who could polish their shoes. And then there was these occasions when the Marines would come down and pass my house and go down camp and went all the way down to the lighthouse where they built a shooting range. And I believe that shooting range was there for the Marines to practice the windage, the gauges, because it was very windy. The wind came from this direction, and they shot in this direction, and they had to adjust the windage on the rifles. And I believe that's why that rifle range was built, and they had targets. And whenever we saw the trucks going down there, we knew that was our entertainment for the day, was to follow the trucks, go down there, and watch the Marines shooting their rifles. And the first time I saw huge rifles and machine guns, and nothing bigger than that. And M1s and carbines, BARs and light machine guns shooting. And the best part of the day, Lucas, was lunch, because they had boxes of C rations and K rations. They came in little boxes, and they would toss them to everybody. And so, we'd grab these K rations, and they were little boxes wrapped in wax, and you could open them up, and inside every one was 4 cigarettes, a little wad of toilet paper, a little P38 opener, and everybody, we call it P30, it was a can opener. Then there was a can with different kind of goodies, hamburger patties, I forget what else they had. And there was always a round piece of chocolate. And there was chiclets. There was chiclet gum, piece of chocolate, 4 cigarettes, toilet paper, and a can. And there was lunch. And there was candy. And there was cigarettes. I mean, it was a big deal to open up and eat with the U.S. Marines. They're firing. Okay, lunchtime, and hey kids, help yourself. It was, and then I remember in 1943, they were ordered, I guess, to ship out. And word got around Kohala that they were dumping everything they had. They were dumping everything they had. And even prior to that, some of my friends and who had connections with the Marines and so forth, they got pup tents. They had little knapsacks. They had canteens. And so the word went around that they were dumping all this stuff. And the dump was just above Harvey Hill. So I remember very well that morning I was at a coffee shop, and there were about 5 or 6 of us, and Gangster Sugata was one of them. And Gangster said, "Well, let's go up there and get our stuff, then let's go find it. It's right at top of Harvey." And Harvey was only like 4 miles away, Here's Halaula, Kapahau, and then Harvey. Well, Kapahau, Honamakau, then Harvey. We could walk it easily. And so, barefoot, shorts, t-shirt, we said, we're gonna go to the marine dump and pick up all the camping equipment, everything we can get. And they were dumping it because these are the same Marines who attacked Iwo Jima, Mount Suribachi. And so they were ready to go. They were on the way to invading Japan. And they left the training area here. But our thought was, we gotta go up there. And I was about 10 years old. And so 4 of us left. We went to Kapahau, and we met some friends. So there were about 6 of us, and we went to Harvey. And then we said, well, right up the road is the dump. Let's go. So we started walking up Harvey Hill. We went 2 miles, top of Harvey Hill, no dump. So we said, well, it must be right around the corner. We walked another 2, 3 miles, no dump. Now we're on a mountain road, no dump. And we said, they gotta be, because we saw these guys coming back. They had military stuff. So it's got to be true. This dump is here. And all we got to do is find it. And so we walked. And we walked. Barefoot, no water, no food, thinking that rubbish dump was just a few miles away. Well, guys, I measured we finally walked and kept on walking on that mountain road that you just drove over. And we finally saw the dump. And I measured the distance from where the dump was at the top of the mountain road. There's a big pool there. They're digging out, you can see the pool where they're digging out some cinders, that big hole, and you drive right past it. And just below that is where they're dumping stuff. And this bulldozer was there, and he didn't move. And trucks of marine stuff was being dumped, but there must have been about 100 scavengers from all over the islands going in there and grabbing whatever they could. And we went down there and grabbed whatever we could. But what was amazing is years later I measured from that dump to where we started at the coffee shop, 24 miles. 24 miles is the longest walk I ever took in my life. And I was only 10 years old, but determined to get our goodies, determined to get camping equipment, and we did. I got a whole knapsack and a canteen and some pop tents and stuff, because they were dumping. And then Santa Claus came on one of those trucks. And the guy that was driving the truck saw all us kids. And instead of going to the area to dump it, he stopped by the road. And he said, "Hey kids, come over here, come on." And evidently, that truck must have just taken everything out of the division's recreational facilities, because it was full of basketballs, baseballs, gloves, bats, all the stuff that the Marines use for playing sports, and they started dumping it on the road. And I said, "All these baseball gloves coming?" And I started grabbing my share. And I grabbed 2 gloves. Wow, I got a baseball gloves. And I tried to get bats, and they were just dumping it. And I said, okay, so let me continue telling that story. And so we never told our parents. And now it was getting dark. Fortunately, the Marines saw all these scavengers up there, and they brought a water tank, a buffalo, a big water tank you could get water. And we had canteen cups. And we had boxes of sea ration. We had all the food you could eat. Boxes. They were just dumping. So we had food, we had water, and we had pop tents, and all our precious goodies. So we made our own little camp of tents, and we had food, and we made a little fire, we stayed warm. And we said, okay, tomorrow we'll go home, for sure. We'll find one way or another to go home. And we're gonna pack as much as we can to carry, and we're gonna go home. So that night we were kind of bedding down, and then we all heard that magic sound. And one of the games we played in Halaula was to sit outside of the maintenance area that took care of the cane trucks, that took all the heavy equipment, and cane trucks were maintained, and that's where they got the gas. So we'd sit outside and listen to the sound of the trucks. And guess, what truck is that? By the sound. And we could guess. Oh, that's D27. No, I don't think, I think that's D40. There was D dash. And say, oh, that's D14. No, that's D17. And then the trucks would come in and then we'd see who was right. So we knew the sound of trucks, plantation trucks. When that evening, when we were just about ready to go to bed, we heard a truck coming up the mountain. And we all knew just by the sound of that truck that it was the molasses truck. And it was going back to the plantation. We got a ride. That was our ride. And I remember everybody saying, the molasses truck. And we knew the driver. His name was Mr. Yoneda. And he lived right around the house from me. And so he knew who I was. And when that truck came up that mountain road, we all ran out and said, stop, 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 stop. And when he stopped and recognized us, I thought we were all going to get dirty lickings right there. What are you guys doing? He was so angry. And he looked at me, he said, does your father know you're here? I said, does your dad, what are you guys doing here? Get on my truck. Now, I really admire his courage because he had this huge tank on this flatbed and only handholds on the side. So we're hanging on the side of the tank, standing on a truck, and some of us snuck in the back between the tank and a cab so we could tuck ourselves in there and hang on. And because we were riding a truck, we couldn't take all our goodies. But guess what goodies I took for sure? Was my 2 gloves. And I took some other stuff, what I could carry. But we left the tents, we left the sea rations, everything was too heavy to carry. We left them all behind. But, you know, that experience, I don't know, when I think about, and I see my grandchildren when they're 10 years old, would I let them walk 24 miles, barefoot, without water? Nothing. And the reason we did that with nothing was because the dump we thought was just 2 miles away, 3 miles away, and then 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles, 7, and we kept walking. 24 miles one way. That was one hell of a, and that is the longest walk I ever took in my life, 10 years old. And when I see my little kids growing up, I say, oh my God, what was I doing when I was 10 years old? But you know, it was that kind of manner we had, that spirit of being free. We could roam, we could walk, we were confident. You know, that wherever we wanted to go, we would go. Wherever we wanted to see, we would see. And we had no doubt in our minds that we're going to find that marine dump and get all our goodies, and we did, to a certain extent. I was sorry I had to leave so much behind because Mr. Yunera wasn't going to let us take anything else. He said, get on that truck. And I remember my dad, when I got home, and I thought, oh, here comes the dirty lickings now. But evidently the parents began talking about these missing boys, and they kind of figured that we had gone, that we would come back. They knew we would come back. And he was so happy to see me that night. It was dark, it was night already, and you know, he just gave me a big hug and asked me where I went, and he said, I figured that's where you guys were. We kind of figured out what happened. And he was very happy to see me home, but I never got any lickings. And but it was an adventure. So World War II in Hawaii, in Kohala was very memorable for me. Very memorable. Watching the Marines shoot the rifles, eating sea rations, walking 24 miles to the rubbish dump, and seeing all these Marines all over the place on weekends, nothing to do, just trying to hang out, just getting away. World War II was something else. And then going to school. We were the first kindergarten class in Halaula. And it was at the old theater down camp, this old building that had a stage, and our kindergarten class was there. And I recall very vividly, one of the favorite times in the morning was when Ishimini Dairy came and brought a carton of milk. And we had a jigger, I guess a pint, I don't know. And everybody had this glass bottle. And that teacher was Olivia Kahn. And she would give us graham crackers, and we had graham crackers and milk. That was wonderful. And then we went to Honolulu School. And that's first, second grade was during the war, and that's where I learned to read, and I could follow the war. And I stayed in Honolulu School all the way to the 7th grade. But we were the same 22, maybe 22 to 20. And I can remember all of them. And we were a mixed breed. You know, there was Portuguese, there was Carmen Torres, David Botelho, Helen Torres. Billy Thomas was part Portuguese. Then we had a lot of Filipinos, Pedro Esseret, Conrado Trinidad, myself, and who else now? And then there was, Japanese, Mini Shigeta, Surugo Nakamoto, Shigeo Shimabukuro, Iwao Shimakuso, Thomas Arakaki. And Shigeo came all the way from New York. He was there. He came from New York, Shigeo Shimabukuro. And he was my classmate. And so we knew each other intimately, very intimately. And it was a joy to go to school, because we were such close friends. And there were no janitors that cleaned the room. And every after school, we cleaned our own rooms. I remember the erasers going outside, taking the dust off the erasers, cleaning the chalkboard, sweeping and mopping. I mean, it was all routine. It was just, and there was only one cafeteria manager who cooked all the food for us. But every class sent 2 students from the 5th grade. So she had about 10 kids to help her in the cafeteria. And we did the cleaning, the chopping, the helping her prepare the food, and served it and cleaned it. And it was natural. I mean, we never had nobody squawked about it, that we were doing janitorial work, that we were doing food service work. It was part of the discipline. And we kind of enjoyed keeping our school clean. In fact, when there was too many weeds, we would actually be told to come to school with weeders, pocket knife. We could bring and weed. And we kept all lawn clear of weeds. We did work in the cafeteria, and we did the work in the classrooms. And our school was always neat, clean. The other thing I remember going to school was, now in retrospect, was the intense Americanism that was indoctrinated in us household. For example, every morning, every class went out to the flagpole In front of the flagpole is still there. Kohala School is that same building is still there, and raise the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of America and the nation for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I still remember the damn thing. Said it every morning for 7 years, every morning. I never sang Hawaii Pono'i, and it was a joy for me to sing Hawaii Pono'i at the Veterans Cemetery. I sang it loud and clear because nobody taught us to sing Hawaii Pono'i. Nobody taught us Hawaiian songs. In music, we're singing Stephen Foster songs. Whenever I never learned Hawaiian song at all. It was, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. This summer, the darkies are gray. That's the kind of songs we learned. We never learned Hawaiian songs. We're pledging allegiance. Oh, Columbia, the gem of the ocean, the land of the free. That's what we learned. And so, we did not learn to be Hawaiian. We did not learn any Hawaiian history at all. And we knew nothing about the overthrow. And whoever was in charge of the curriculum at Hawaii, they deliberately kept all of it out of us. We weren't told the truth. And we were deliberately meant not to learn the truth. Well, as you know, that's all gone. Hawaiian language is here, strong and steady, and I helped to sponsor the first conference of Hawaiian language teachers. It is now going strong. Terms like ohana and Hawaiian terms are being used a lot. The Hawaiian language is now an official language for the state of Hawaii. Place names are now being remembered. We're not using nicknames, we're using Hawaiian place names. We're now singing, we're now dancing, we're now learning our language, we're now learning our own history, we're learning more about the overthrow. And I'm so proud all 4 of my grandchildren speak more Hawaiian than I do. And it's so fun I can hear them arguing in Hawaiian. Pleases me to watch my kids speaking Hawaiian and knowing it better than I do. So the education I had growing up was entirely different. When I got to the 7th grade, well, actually there was some sad parts about my life too, Lucas. My mother left when I was 8 years old. My sister was 12. She had to take care of the house. And it was very traumatic for us. There were 6 of us. My mother left. I never saw her again until I was 32 years old. Nobody knew where she went. There were 6 of us, and the Department of Social Services said my dad couldn't. My brother was only 2. My older sister was 12. It was a sad, sad years of my life, having no mother. But having a beautiful community to support me, having a safe place to grow up, and having aunties and uncles, surrounded by aunties and uncles, who really cared about us, knowing that my mother left. We were under the wings of hundreds of people that know the Cachola kids needed help. My father needed help. And when the Department of Social Services came and said, talked to my father, and my father told us that, we might have to be adopted, it killed me. Really killed me. But then my aunt on Maui adopted one of to keep it in the family, And then my sister went to Kamehameha school, so that left 4. And so my father said, son, if you can get into Kamehameha schools and board there, that'll be 3, and we won't have to be broken up. And so he said, you gotta get into Kamehameha. And I didn't want to go. Jeez. I mean, my whole life was so good in Kohala. I was home. That was my home. And I had to leave it. I had to go, to board. Well, that's a whole nother story. But to make it long, there was something that happened at Kamehameha. I tried to flunk the test. I tried to give them the worst interview. And lo and behold, I got accepted anyway. I really did my best to flunk the admissions exams. And when they asked me, I gave them all the bad answers I could, and I still got accepted. And so I went to Kamehameha, and my father couldn't even afford to pay the tuition. It was only $124 a year. And plane fare, round trip, I think one way was something like $24 or something. And so the school, Kamehameha schools knew that. I came from a very modest family. And so they said, okay, if you work 50 hours doing odds and ends around the campus, your tuition is free. So I worked, and I carried a card, and I went to the library after lunch. I had 20 minutes, and Mrs. Boyne taught me the Dewey Decimal System. I could return books. And she gave me other little chores, and in 1 year I paid my own tuition. And then Liliuokalani Trust, by the way, when Queen Liliuokalani died, she left her entire estate for orphan and indigent Hawaiian children. That was us. And so they said, if you get to Kamehameha and you behave and you keep up your grades, we'll pay for all of your bills. My laundry bill, my store bill, pencil, papers, whatever I needed. When I needed a haircut, when I needed new shoes or whatever, they paid for it. So deep in my heart, Lucas, I grew up with 2 aunties that really took care of my family. One was Auntie Bernice Paul, Bishop, Kamehameha Schools, and the other was Queen Liliuokalani, who took care of orphan and indigents and paid all my bills for 5 years until I graduated. And so I'm always going to be supporting the Queen. And that's who was on the throne during the overthrow. And it took us, anyway, we got to get Hawaii back. And those of us who still support the Queen and everything she stood for, we're going to get it back. Hawaii is not for sale, as Cachola says, and it can't be stolen. Hawaii cannot be stolen, and Hawaii is not for sale. I believe that very strongly. And I wish he becomes the next governor, okay? So you gotta allow me these 2 seconds to speak on behalf of Cachola, because he's gonna be the best governor. And but what's the basic line here? Growing up without a mother was not easy. And part of my personal life was that. But I think the love of Kohala people, the mana, the spirit of Kohala, the spirit of being free, and the spirit of being supported and loved by many people is what kept me going. It was a very important part. And even here's another instance that this is true. After 2 weeks at Kamehameha, I said, I couldn't stand it. Why couldn't I stand it? I had to wear shoes every day. I had to wear a necktie. I had a long sleeve uniform. I had to sew my patches in it. I had to dress right. I had to look right. My room was inspected every time. It was a military school. It was I mean, the handkerchiefs have to be here, the socks have to be here, this was only the towels. It was so regulated you couldn't believe it. But in a way, the regulation taught me a lot of discipline. But I was having a hard time. And it was a culture shock. It was psychological shock. It was, putting on a uniform, wearing shoes every day, necktie. Every minute of the day was regulated, from the time you woke up until you went to bed. And so after 2 weeks, I said to myself, I'm going home. I want to go home. And I was walking to the only public telephone available outside of the school office. And I was walking towards the phone. I was walking past the mailboxes of all the boys. And I saw one mailbox that was full of letters. I said, wow, that guy got a bunch of letters. And the closer I got, I said, that's my box. It's my box. Guess what, Lucas? While I was walking to the phone to call my dad to let him know I want to come home, I see my box full of letters. Immediately I grab them and I said, where they from? And guess what? It's every one of my classmates from Kohala writing me a letter, a personal letter. Minnie, Shigeru, Tommy, and I kept saying, I'd be damned. I didn't even know. These guys probably, it was probably the first letter they wrote in their lives. But it was to me. And so I sat down on a bench right there, and I opened up one or two, and then a third one and a fourth one. And they were all saying the same things. They were all saying the same things. Guess what they were saying? Fred, we're so proud of you. Fred, you're just as smart as anybody else out there. Fred, do good for your family and for the community. Fred, and I said to him, how can I go home? How can I go home with my friends expecting so much of me? With my friends being so proud that I was here. And it began to sink into me, this feeling, Luke, is that you're not Fred Cachola. You're Fred Cachola from Kohala. You're Fred Cachola from Kohala. That I was not just me. I was a representative. I was, as my friends called me and honored me, I'm a son of Kohala. And I'm very proud of that. And I became very proud of that. And I said to myself, I'm going to stay at Kamehameha. I'm going to get straight A's. I'm going to do everything I can. And I did. I think I was 8th in a class of 200, something like that. I got accepted at every college I applied to. I made the honor roll several times. And I told everybody I was so proud to be, and everybody in Kamehameha knew that I came from Kohala. I made it well known. And so, all my life has been, I've been touched. So when I go to the Kohala reunion, and I see Helen Pa'alua, I see Patsy Botello, I see Shigeru Shimabukuro from New York. And a couple of times I saw Iwao from Arizona. He's a dentist now in Arizona. He was. It gives me that kind of feeling of Kohala still being Kohala. That the mana, the spirit that nurtured us growing up in Kohala is still there. That spirit of Kohala is still there. We've got to keep it alive. We've got to keep it for the next youth that are growing up. I want them to grow up with a kind of feeling of freedom, of joy, of enjoying that beautiful environment up there. And knowing the stories about Kamehameha, knowing its history, its legacy, and being proud of that place. And I really, and that's why I helped to create the community reunion 20 years ago, because I don't want the spirit of Kohala to die. I don't want the spirit that nurtured me without a mother, but kept me going. That really kept me going. And so, that's what growing up in Kohala was like. The plantation life, believe it or not, it was simple, basic, but it was good, pure, honest, clean, healthy. I laugh when people talk about organic foods. Shit, that's all we had. Stuff that we grew in our garden. My father kept me busy. Not only the yard and the daylilies, but he bought chickens, he bought ducks, rabbits, and they weren't pets, they were food. Yeah. I learned how to clean and kill a rabbit before I got 10 years old. And it was a joy for me to bring food to the table. Going down a gulch, getting bananas, coming home with a bunch of ripe bananas. Wow. Yeah. It was great when I could go out, and my sister would tell me, Fred, go get something for salad. And I'd get out there in my garden, pick some tomatoes, pick some lettuce. And every day, I'd come home, feed the chickens, collect the eggs, always had fresh eggs, always. And then when it was, and my father used to watch him, he said, son, why don't you kill a chicken for this weekend? No problem. Get a big plangana, big pail, fill it up with hot water, put the chicken in there, soak the feathers, and of course, cut the head off, cleaned it, give it to my sisters. Chicken for dinner. Ducks was hard. I hated to clean ducks because the feathers weren't like the chickens. You could pluck them out. Ducks, you got to almost pull them out with the pliers, almost like, because it's really stuck into the skin. And Thanksgiving, we didn't have turkeys, we had ducks. And my dad said, well, son, you gotta clean the duck. And I cleaned it up, and it took me a while. And then he would say, take it down to the Chongshu family, and she would roast, Chinese family, and she would roast it for us. And I'd go down, pick it up, and she charged me $5 for the kerosene and cooking it, and that was our Thanksgiving. And so, but again, it felt like, I'm contributing to my family. I got food on the table, and they're all organic, right? They're all organic, and they're all healthy, and it's all fresh. So, I made it 7 years old, and I swear, part of, I think, and I've never been in a hospital except this past few months. It's the first time really I've been in a hospital. And growing up, I never been in a hospital for 85 years or longer. It's pretty damn good. And I believe a lot of that was because of the way we were brought up. I never had soda water, we never had soda water, ice cream and stuff like that, candies. Never. Chewing cane was our snack. Eating guavas and papayas and fish from... The first fish we used to catch was almost guaranteed. We'd clean it, put it on a hot rock, and let it dry, because that was lunch. That was lunch. If you're going to be hungry, then catch another one, clean it, put it on the same rock. Now you got 2 fish to eat. You want something on the side? Get some OP. You got OP, you got fish. Simple, clean, healthy, and fun, I mean, that's the kind of childhood I had, and that was great. And I keep telling people, Mark Twain had nothing to do with us. We grew up better than him on the Mississippi River. And Huckleberry Finn and Mark Twain had nothing on the Kohala boys. I mean, we did a hell of a lot more than playing in a muddy river. We had a clean ocean. We had miles of open land that we could, and we were never lost. We were never lost. And I remember once we said, and we always heard about this place, Avini. And so we said, well, it's up there someplace. Let's go look for it. And so we made lunch. We made some rice balls, and we had a couple of cans of Vienna sausage, and put them in our pockets, and we walked up Kohala. And when we got to the forest line, there was a forest ranger up there in his truck, and he said, what the hell are you kids doing up here? I mean, we went to the end of the cane fields, not a forest, and Avini is this way, so we're going to just take a left and go to Avini. And he said, where are you guys going? And we said, we're going to Avini. And he just laughed, and he said, you're going where? He said, yeah, look, you got to go to He said, kids, you better turn around and get home right now. And he said, you go home right now. You're not going to go to Avini. It's too dangerous, it's too far, it's going to take you days. And you don't know where it's at. You're going to get lost. So go home right now. And he was right. He was right. But we still had the Avini, we'll find it. We had that attitude, and he changed our minds. Yeah. Or if you went fishing, you ate that was what you ate. It wasn't just for fun and games. It was there for fun. Yes, it was fun, but it was also food. How nice to bring home some fish. And so, Lucas, that's part of my story. Part of it is sad too. When my mother left, and when I was forced to go to Kamehameha. But Kamehameha did something to me too. he taught me the letters. I wish I had kept those. It was a turning point in my life when I read those letters from my classmates, personal letters, seeing how proud they were, that I was good enough, that I was smart enough, that I could do just as well as anybody else. And they were right. They were right. And Lucas, I was really honored a few days ago, when I got all these certificates. I can't reach that envelope. But I'm just going to close this interview real quickly and shortly. But I'm not trying to brag. I'm just trying to make a point that my friends in Kohala, I got this certificate from Congress. This is Kohala with a commendation, a message of commendation from Congress. And then I got another commendation from the city council and from the mayor. And believe me, Lucas, I didn't expect any of that. My friends knew that's not me. That I'm not Fred Cachola to get certificates. I'm Fred Cachola because I love Kohala. And I guess when you're 87 years old and you do all the things you do, like learning the history and talking to the Kohala kupuna. I wish I had all your equipment. I wish I had all your knowledge 40, 50 years ago, because I would have been able to record the kind of legacy you're trying to do, but in a much better way. All I could do was listen and write. And I did. And that's how I learned about the Kamehameha birthstones. That's how I wrote the law and the resolution that saved those stones. It became part of Lapakai State Park. Why? Because they were in weeds. When Iloke died, nobody took care of the birthstones. And I had a dream one. And I dreamt that this man who had a museum was collecting stones, and that he had actually stolen the stones and kept it at his museum. And I said, that cannot be. And I went back to Kohala and I found them, and they were in a bunch of weeds. And I said, we cannot let this happen. And so I wrote a resolution, got it passed through the Hawaiian Civic Clubs, took it to the legislature, and they liked that resolution so well they made it into a law. So I helped to write the law that saved the birthstones of Kamehameha. And I belonged to a group called the Hikai, 7 of us. Again, I'm not trying to brag, but just 7 of us who love Kohala so dearly. When we saw Kohala being bought by millionaires, we saw the first millionaire that was going to turn 17 acres between Mahokona and Kauai into his own Shangri-La, like it was he had in South Africa. We said, we're going to stop this guy. He's not going to do it. Why? Because there were millionaires who had bought other properties and they were waiting to be able to build down there. We said, we stop this guy, we'll stop the others, and we did. We filed a contested case. We challenged his permit, challenged the process. And in the end, we had a 1-week hearing in the courthouse here in Kohala. And the court officer was ready to tell him his permit was going to be denied. Before he did that, he quit. He spent $500,000 trying to create It's Africa Shangri-La. So now when you drive, Lucas, from Mahokona to Kauai, and you don't see one building, right? Not one building. It's because the people of Kohala are not going to let it happen. And we're going to challenge anybody who tries to build. So when we stopped this millionaire, his name was Jonathan Cohen. And we met with him early. We tried to persuade him, go build somewhere else. Go mark off the road. Don't stay right on the coastline. Don't build a Shangri-La on 17 acres. Please, go somewhere else. He refused. He had architects from Boston. He paid his archaeologists $40,000 to lie. His septic system was going right into the ocean. His archaeologists called this grave a fishing shrine. We contested everything they said, and he left. He left. And we stopped him. Then this other millionaire was waiting. When he left, we took over his property. And then this place called Cachola, they had acres and acres of 3-acre lots ready to sell. They left. So yes, you can thank 7 of us for saving that coastline, because it wasn't easy. And again, people like Tony Worthington, Gail Byrne, Joe Carvalho, Mike Isaacs. In the past 10 years, we've raised over $20 million from public funds, and we saved over 1,000 acres of coastline in Kohala. And we're going to try to keep it like that. We're saving historic sites, Kapanaya, Hapu'u, Mahokona, all these places. Mahokona was going to be a resort development. Over. Pow. Never. You know. So all these rich people trying to come into Kohala and make it like their own private suburbs. We're not going to let that happen as much as possible. Now, some of it may be happening, we couldn't do it all. But along that coastline, isn't it nice, Lucas, to drive 10, 12 miles and see nothing, right down to the ocean? You go to Maui, you cannot do that. There's not one place on. You go Kaanapali, from Lahaina to Honolulu, you can even see the ocean. There's so many buildings sticking up. Go to Oahu, my goodness, it's a lost. Oahu is becoming a suburb of Los Angeles. I was down at the airport hotel when I went to the hospital to treat this cancer in my throat. Anyway, as I was at the airport hotel, I told my wife, I was outside. I said, this place looks like Los Angeles. It sounds like Los Angeles, and it smells like Los Angeles. I said, oh my God, let's go home. When I go to Honolulu now, look at what, we have 6 acres here. Yeah, you got 3 in the front. I got 12 acres up in Kohala. It's so nice. I can see Mauna Kea. Yeah. I can go down to a beach and I can actually walk in. I don't have to step over bodies. Right? I can drive 12 miles and see an open coastline. That takes work, that takes determination, but again, I felt very honored, Lucas. I felt very honored. And so that's part of my story. I know this has been a little long, but when you're 87 years old, you live a lot, so you got a lot to say. And I'm sorry if this interview took too long. And I know you're going to cut it down to 5 minutes. Whatever 5 minutes you decide is up to you. Whatever 5 minutes you decide from this, hour and a half interview, do what you like with it. But I don't mind if you just give me the rough cut, whatever it is. Because I don't have to say the same stories over and over again. I can use your video. Yeah? So, don't edit anything, just send me the copy. And whatever it is, I can share it with others, I can share it with Nakili. And he can edit and use some of it for his film. And good luck to both of you with this project. It's a wonderful project. And I'm glad you're doing it as best as you can. Do a good job. Make Kohala proud. Make Kohala live again. It's not going to die, Lucas, and you're going to keep it alive. So, aloha, thank you very much. I'm Paul. Okay? Is that okay, Paul?
Yeah. Good? Yeah, we did.